wait, how do I lead a gang but then walk with Christ? So it was a challenging time for me as a baby Christian, trying to follow the word of God, but having so much influence on man.
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Man, I'm super excited to be here.
Are
Go
you?
figure.
I
I always am. I mean,
I
we
know.
get to talk to some cool people. We get to talk to each other. I'm telling you, the best thing we ever did was drop into podcasting.
I know, and decide we're going to do guests because the first season had no guests.
Yeah, no guests, but it was still edifying. It was still good.
It was good.
Man, I enjoyed our time together.
Yeah.
Today, it's kind of like, I think the thought that's been on my mind most of the day as I think towards this interview is beauty to ashes. When we look at this, we're looking at Isaiah 61. And Isaiah's coming in. He's like, I got the Spirit of God upon me, right? And he's like, I'm bringing this good word. And it's like, wow, good news to what, though? Good word to what? To the poor, right? To the broken hearted. He's proclaiming liberty to the captives and the opening of the prisons to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. See, he's coming to bring this message of righteousness, of salvation, of restoration. He's bringing this message that turns beauty, or, takes beauty and turns them from ashes,
Yeah.
And I think that today's story, today's guest, awesome friend of ours, is dialed right in on that.
Yeah.
From this beauty to, this ashes turns to beauty.
Yeah.
I stumbled all through that.
It's okay.
It's called cool because,
It's
hey,
okay.
it's
Beauty
okay.
to ashes
But I mean,
rolls off the tongue. Ashes to beauty doesn't.
I know,
so
right?
I feel you.
Beauty to ashes. But I'm just like, that's the thought on my mind today.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sitting there like, whoa, beauty from ashes.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, beauty from ashes.
Yeah, because, this whole season, obey him before anyone else. One of the things that tends to happen is what happens when you're not obeying, right? You're in rebellion, and a lot of different things happen. There's the worldly conclusions and consequences. There's the stuff that happens from God's side, the conviction, the rub, all that stuff happens, right? And we brought someone on that is a perfect fit because of how inspirational and encouraging his story is. We want to welcome Tuan Nguyen. He is a kingdom entrepreneur and leadership speaker, but only a few years ago, he was in prison. With all of the things that he was doing, he had no prospects except for one, and that's Jesus. And the world counted him out, but God's grace counted him in. So we want to welcome you here. We're happy to have you, Tuan.
What's up?
What a great intro, like ashes to beauty. That was so poetic how you segued that in. So super cool. Definitely an honor just to be jamming out with you guys on this podcast. So it's been a long time coming. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think that when I first heard little snippets of your story through Facebook, I was already very intrigued, thought this would be great. And I didn't know what season, we didn't really know, but we had the chat 3-4 seasons ago, maybe 3 seasons ago. But I think that this is one of those, these topics that's just it's relatable to everybody because we're all told obey your parents, listen to your boss, listen to the laws, then it's listen to God, then it's all this, we all have experience with this, but you have a very amazing story. So before we kind of go all in,
Go deeper.
Yeah, before we go all in, do you want to tell us a little bit of your story? What is how did you start out? Where were you?
Yeah, I would say, I guess the short version for me was I was someone that was just lost in the sauce. I grew up in a typical Asian culture household where we worship this little statue, a green statue. He's kind of fat. But yeah, so that's what I kind of grew up in. And, I think my parents, they were very hard workers coming from Vietnam, and all they wanted was just to provide the American dream, right? Just financial freedom. We want our kids to be doctors and just live the successful life. And so they worked very, very hard, which meant my dad was never around. And so I was just in search of leadership. I was just looking for a role model. And, I had some really good parents. And even though I had great parents, we didn't have Christ in our lives early on. Right. And so I was always in search of purpose and just looking for identity. And so long story short, I just, started getting myself involved with gangs, started dipping and dabbing with drugs at an early young age, which led me down a path of being sent to military school at the age of 13, which only caused more rebellion because of the lack of obedience in my household.
Right.
And so that just really started a lot of abandonment issues, rejection. Hey, I thought you loved me. How could you do this by sending me away? Because as a child, I didn't understand that they just wanted me to do good, and they just felt like they couldn't correct me anymore. So they sent me away.
Right.
And then of course that led down to a path of drugs, addiction, selling drugs, and that landed me in prison not once, not twice, but actually 3 times in my pursuit of finding myself.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting how parents we make those mistakes. It's like there's a necessity for love, and we think that there's a necessity for discipline. Now, granted, discipline and love, they work together, but if they're separated, then we find ourselves into situations that you found yourself in, where we have this discipline, and it's not that they didn't love you. I'm not saying that. Let's get that clear. Right. But like you said, there was no time. Yeah. And when we start to foster these ideas of love, and we start to experience this love, it's hard to do that. It's like so much discipline. It's like obedience, like what we're talking about in this season. It's like, people beat obedience, and they forget to talk about the love of God.
Right.
It's like, hold on. These are synonymous. They go together.
Yeah. You have to see the relationship between the two of them. And I like that you said, this was all this hot mess. You said it was like you were caught up in the sauce because you were trying to figure out who you were, because that wasn't solidified. And that's like a common thread through every season. We've had people bringing up, like, why were they in that? Because they didn't know who they were. They didn't have any kind of foundation. So when you're starting out, you're in prison 3 different times. At what point in all of this did Christ or the gospel or the Bible or any of that, when did that cross the table?
I would say my second trip down. Okay. That was when, like, life, my first time down, I wasn't taking extreme ownership of what happened. It was always someone else that caused me to go to prison. I got snitched out. So I was always blaming someone else. And so there was never really transformation. I never really had any reason to seek Jesus during that time, because I was like, you know what? I can do it bigger and better. So my whole mindset was, I'm going to go find somebody from the cartel down here in the valley, and I'm going to become this big time drug dealer because I get this great connection. So that's
right.
Deep down inside, that was like, I just made a simple mistake, and I can still do this. And so when I got out, maybe lasted about a couple years doing the same thing, nothing changed. And I went right back into prison the second time. But the only difference this time was I was completely broken when I came in. And I found myself, due to the lack of obedience, since we're talking about obedience, where I broke the laws. And the laws were made for us, for our safety. And since I broke the laws, here I am suffering the consequences. And I was trying to fix everything when I was in county jail. I was facing, I think, 2 8-year sentences at this time. And that's when I just got sick and tired. And just one night, I found a Gideon's Pocket Bible, a New Testament. Had no clue how to read the Bible. And I think I just opened up a page in Psalms. And the only thing I did know was there is a way by the name of Jesus. And there wasn't like this ABC type prayer where I learned how to repeat something. It was more of like, okay, Jesus, I've heard that you can change my life. And I don't know how this works, but I'm just surrendering to you right now. Like I was just broken in tears. And it wasn't like these magical words that someone got me to repeat.
Right.
It was just a simple cry out and saying, Jesus, save me. And that was the beginning of God just really changing me from the inside out.
Yeah. I want to back that up a little bit. I want to kind of dig into, where was that seed planted though?
Yeah.
Like, where did that seed come from? Because there was somebody or something, or somehow there might have been some obedience from somebody else. And it's like, how did that seed get planted even that you would turn to the Gideon Bible?
Well, actually, I would say my mom, at the age of 13, when my mom sent me to military school, she realized that the things that they were practicing when it came to idol worship, they were all wrong. And it was funny because there was 2 evangelicals that just came by my mom's shop one day, shared the gospel with her, and then she just gave her life to Christ. But a big part of our story in our family was when my mom got saved, she went all in. And she tried taking me to church, trying to take my my sister to church. And my dad was not trying to hear none of this. He had this big old golden medallion with this Buddha jade pendant. And he was like, you do you, boo-boo, but we ain't going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And I remember my mom would always share these stories about how she used to pray so hard for God to get rid of that necklace. And one day, my dad was swimming down in South Padre. And, you know, remember that prayer. So my dad, he loves going out into the deep water. And one time he went out deep, he came back, and then guess what happens? The necklace fell off somewhere. Okay. Wow. So the first person he runs to in the midst of this situation is my mom. And so he cries to my mom, says, hey, I just lost my necklace. Can you help me find it? And my mom's like inside just rejoicing because of her prayers. And here's what she does. Instead of just rejoicing, she says, you know what? I'm going to pray to God right now. And I'm going to ask God to help me find this necklace to show to my husband that you're the real deal.
Oh, whoa. Okay, come on.
Okay, Elijah.
Okay. So you can think, okay, how big is the ocean right now? Like, where would you even start?
Right.
And my mom steps out in faith, and I think maybe she stepped out into the water, and as she got deeper, you know, all she just was picking up was like, you know, seaweeds and shells and just sand. And then all of a sudden she tells a story about this big wave that forms. And as it gets closer to the shore, it hits her, knocks her down into the water. But as she rises up, guess what's in her hand?
A necklace.
Yo.
A necklace.
That's crazy. That's cool.
Yeah. And she screamed, and my dad came racing over there, and he wouldn't even touch it. They got rid of that necklace. They sold the pendant. We still have the necklace today in our household, but it's replaced with a crucifix now. So that was the beginning of our family, our entire family coming to Christ.
Oh, so praise God for that.
That obedience. I was like, where's that seed? Right? Where is that seed? What a beautiful story that your mom, you know, takes on the gospel, right? And she's like, okay, I have a mission to do. This is my mission, right? You got a mission field. So in your life, I'm just keep with questions.
No, yeah.
So in your mission life, like now you've picked up this Gideon Bible, right? You've read in the Psalms, you're broken, you're standing there in front of Christ. When did you start to realize that you have a mission in all of this? That you are a part of this now, that it's no longer just a separation, but now that you're part of this family, this heavenly kingdom?
Well, it's funny because after I gave my life to Christ, it was around December 25th. That's when I marked it in my Gideon's Bible, just to have a date, just to kind of remember. God allowed me to be sent out, you know, like maybe about 12 hours away from my family. And so I didn't really get visits or anything. I was still part of a gang. And the funny thing was, as a gang member, I was actually voted to be the gang speaker, or the one that calls the shots. All right. Okay. So I was kind of like torn in a place of like, wait, how do I lead a gang but then walk with Christ? So it was it was a challenging time for me as a baby Christian, trying to follow the word of God, but having so much influence on, man, could it be that God could still use me in the midst of my mess to influence some of my homeboys that maybe would never get to know Christ? And so I just stayed where I was at, and I just kept on studying the word. And I remember going to church one time, and a chaplain, it was a pastor. He had this big cowboy hat. And as I walked in, never seen this guy before, he calls me out on the line. He goes, God has a plan for you, boy. And, you know, he has this country accent. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I had a dream about you. And I said, me? He said, yep. He says, I want you to be on the ministry team. And I'm like, you got the wrong guy here. Like, I don't know how to serve in ministry. Like, I barely know how to read the Bible. And as a matter of fact, I speak for a gang. Like, what would you want to, what would a pastor like you want to do with a guy like me? But guess what I did? I said yes. And when I said yes, within 3 months, I started preaching the gospel from the pulpit. And it was just really crazy to see that quick transformation. God used me in that season where he used my influence to be able to bring all my homeboys or all my gang members to church to listen to me preach.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes.
I think that is one of the things, that's a barrier. Like, I'm not good enough, like I'm not ready yet, all that.
Qualified.
And yet what's funny is more often than not, you'll hear people come to Christ and they have no idea, and they might not think they're good enough or whatever, but then all of a sudden they're like saying yes to stuff like Isaiah, like, yes, send me, like, sure, and all of a sudden that's like the pinnacle that shoots you off into everything. And I like that what you said about, the law is made for our good, for our safety, right? And in Romans 7, it talks about the law is made to point out our sin, not so that we are forever stuck in condemnation, right? That's what it does when you don't have Christ. But it exists to point out you're not good enough. You can't do it. Sorry, you already broke it. Like, it's not there for you to fit to a T. It's there to show you can't fit it to a T because you don't have that together. And then the gospel, comes in, grace comes in, and you understand that you can move. And so I think wow. I love your mom's story. I didn't know that part. At all.
That's pretty cool.
And I love that but then when you said about how you were like, I knew this much about Jesus, I was like, how'd you know that much about Jesus? When suddenly you just found the Gideon Bible. But yeah, no, that's
it's amazing cool. How God walks us through life. Sometimes we're so in awe. It's like an awe and wonder type moment where I don't feel like I'm anything. I don't feel like I'm moving anywhere. But then all of a sudden, all these things keep popping up. Here you are, a spokesman for a gang.
I didn't even know they voted spokesman.
And over here, you got a guy saying, "No, you're gonna be a spokesman for Christ." Wow. So then the intermingling there. So you had this idea. Well, maybe if I just stay where I'm at and intermingle. Did you plant any seeds?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the religious sects in the prison would just condemn me. They would use Bible verses like, you can't serve God and serve mammon at the same time. I'm like, wait. And I was so conflicted in obedience at that time because I didn't know what to do. I felt that I had, on one perspective was, man, how does that look if I say, hey, you guys aren't good enough and I'm your spokesperson or so-called leader, and I'm just going to say, hey, I'm leaving y'all. I'm following Christ, and I don't want nothing to do with y'all. But on the other spectrum was, man, you know what? How can I show the love of God even in my position right now to where I'm not abandoning them, but I can still be more influential and then show them the right way? And so I stuck it through, and God really changed a lot of those guys' lives just because I stood my ground and didn't follow the religious leaders on what you're violating these rules and et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, I think I was reading something today. Actually, it was the commandments in the New Testament. 1,050 of them.
Wow.
Commandments. Now that's not all the like don't not, but that's like be this or be that or do this or go this or don't do this. 1,050 of them. So I'm looking at this list. You could take that on as a religious project, I guess, and read and say, I have to adhere to all these. Or I just looked at it, I looked up, I was like, thank you, Lord, for grace. Because, I mean, look, you stayed in a position, but I bet also some of the decisions that you would make as that spokesman changed as well. Because, I mean, when you start having that heart for Christ and you start having that heart and that love of God, then the decisions change. And I'll bet you that it was a shift ever so slightly. And so these dudes were probably like, okay. and it's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like how you intermingled that in.
Yeah. And I think like it comes, so I had some verses for this episode just in case they fit in. And of course, God's so cool and they fit in. But in Psalm 143:10, it says, teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Let your good spirit lead me on level ground. And when I read that, I think about how we fight our old tendencies and come into a new type of stability in him. But very rarely do you meet someone where like instantaneous, all these things were shed and they just are now like super duper clean, still flawed, but like they can just shed it all, walk away from it all, do all that. And at first I thought, oh, how blessed are they? And then I realized the vast majority of us, because we can't get it all together, because we don't all know perfectly every way we should walk at all given times, it's like he has this ultimate grace. And in his perfect timing, he starts weaning us off some things. He'll rip some stuff out of our hands if he knows it's going to kill us. But other things, he weans us off. Other things, he has us there for a season, then we're going to have grown out of it. And I'm interested, like you said that you were the speaker. Now you're obviously no longer the speaker. I know you're blessed with words. You're blessed to be, I like to say, just you're a talker in a good way. Like you have a way with words. And I see how they would condemn you in one way, but yet God's still working in you in the same way that Satan would be accusing. And the Lord just says, put him in clean garments then. Didn't even bother looking at the accuser, doesn't even mess with that. So I am curious, like, for you to continue in, like, okay, you were speaker. When did that transition? You know, like when did you feel like, okay, this is no longer the place? My mission field. You know, my mission field has now changed.
Yeah, I think it was just for a season of that time. And I think God allowed I think God used me during that season just to develop my character. And then now I use that pain as a passport, because imagine if I didn't have that experience of saying, hey, you know what? I was actually a former gang leader that turned ministry leader, you know? And so I think that just became part of my story. Now I wouldn't suggest, hey, you go join a gang so then you can, you know, I would not say that, but you know, for me, that was just part of my story there. But yeah.
So yeah, bro, I mean, yeah, look, y'all, you don't have to go find brokenness to move forward in the kingdom.
Right. You have it all right.
You're okay. You've got this. Don't like that. Don't go get jumped in, y'all. It doesn't feel good.
You know what's so funny, Shay? We were hosting a little connect group with just a bunch of guys. Most of us were formerly incarcerated. And it's funny. There's just like this one random white guy that just signed up online and just showed up one day, and he just did not fit in the group. And so as we were like sharing our little personal testimonies on how God saved us and then where we came from, he was listening to all our prison stories and how we got caught. And when it got to him, he was like, I feel like I need to go to prison now to have a testimony like you.
No.
Look, no. Yeah, you hear that a lot when people think like, when they're not firmly rooted in the identity God is working on them in, when they look at other testimonies, they're like, oh, to be relevant and relatable, I need to go consume tons of garbage like y'all consumed so I can relate. It's like, no, trust, you consumed your own garbage. You just don't know it's garbage. You need to just get heartbroken over the fact what you thought was cake was garbage. You don't need to go eat something you know is trash. You know what I mean? Like, we all have something that, like, God did not initially condone.
I get that too, brother. They're like, whoa, you've been through all that? And they're like, I grew up in the church. And I'm like, no, that's good.
I know, you're the encouragement as we raise our kids.
I'm like,
right.
I've got this little girl, and I'm like, please don't walk my steps that I walked before Christ. Walk Christ's steps. And as we go in this, we're moving forward. We're progressing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love everything. Man, your mom finds, I want the necklace gone. Gone. Man, I want to find the necklace to prove to him that you exist. Necklace is there. Okay. You know what? I'll bet the prayers that she threw down were phenomenal.
Yeah.
We're like, even for your life, for your sister's life, for your dad's life. But as we're moving forward in this, you know, this story is just amazing to me. I love how God has just shown himself in all of this. So you went into the ministry.
Yeah.
You started preaching from the pulpit, 3 months in. Where are you at now? I know what you do. I don't know your ministry side as much as I know but it's all ministry. I mean, you work, under the umbrella. You get, all glory goes to God. So where did ministry start? How has ministry progressed forward? Where has it transitioned? Where are you now?
Yeah, during my incarceration, God gave me this passion, this fire for leadership and communication. I started realizing the biggest gap in prison reform is men just don't have vision upon leaving. And so they settle for the average 9 to 5. And for me, I was like, man, you know what? I just didn't want that. Like, that's when that word entrepreneur really came into the picture. Was people don't buy average at the end of the day. They don't buy average Christianity. And for me, I was like, you know what? I want to do more. I believe God can do more with my life. I didn't know what that looked like. And I wanted to become a leadership speaker and a coach. So I joined the John Maxwell team. You guys don't know John Maxwell. He's one of the greatest leadership speakers and coaches out there. And that was just part of a vision that God gave me, because I wanted to transform prison culture through leadership, because that's what happened to me. The hardest person you have to lead is yourself. Right. And so how do we expect to leave a legacy and raise a family and stay clean and sober when you don't have the leadership skills to just lead yourself first before trying to lead anybody else? Right. So upon getting out of prison, I've been able to you kind of step into my calling, right? I love this right here. God places purpose in our hearts, and a lot of us, in order for us to fulfill it, we have to focus on what's in our hands. You see? And so I learned how to cultivate what God has placed in my hands to fulfill what's in my heart. And I got to say, I've been home 3 years now, and it's been quite a journey. I've been able to grow. Just last week for this podcast, which is really cool, is I got to, grow $1 million coaching company in the last 14 months. And it's been challenging in this season of obedience, because now I'm in a relationship, we're pursuing marriage. That's even super hard to stay in obedience and just staying in that realm of just creating boundaries, because I didn't have that. I didn't have any healthy relationships before getting saved. So now just stepping into that, managing a team, growing a company, then serving in leadership at church. Like, where was the training in this? So I would say, since we're on the topic of obedience was easier for me when I was in prison. Right. Now obedience is so much harder, because I know how to check the box. Right. I know how to show up in church. I know how to serve. I know how to give and check. But then I find myself striving on a lot of days where I can't rest. My phone is always in my hands, and just trying to keep up with so much stuff going on. Social media, it's been a challenging season of obedience for me, even though things are going really well, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
That's when it usually comes in and rears up. Everything's going good, and then you throw in a wife. Or okay, I'm not throwing that out there yet, but I know you're seeking, in marriage, you're in a relationship, so that adds in. Yeah. Our lives, single life. When I was coming back to church, I hit my rock bottom. I was like, all in, every day, and then Michelle, and that's fine. I said, okay, you ride along with me, ride along with me. There's some things some boundaries. Then you get married, and see, now you have another portion of ministry. And so now when you enter into that marriage, you're not just entering into a love, a love of my life. Oh, my darling. No, it's a ministry. And we have to look at it that way, especially people like you and I who are really focused in what we do and what we're going through. I'm not here to teach either, but I'm just saying it's like, but we focus in this ministry. And so when I can dial that in as my ministry, well, now I've set aside time for that. Now I've compartmentalized. Okay, I work at the church. I work with men's ministry. I work with life group ministry. I run these programs. I have a podcast. I have a full-time job. I have now I have a wife, and so food pantry in Kenya. And so now you have to really dial it in. And I guess I am kind of talking to you from a position. You have to find that ministry in your family. God gave you family. God gives us family. It's God, my family, and then everything else. And so I've had to set aside time. I mean, I've gone to pastor, and it's cool to have leaders that really sit in it with you and say, okay, you know what, that's okay. That's good. Hey, on Saturday, pastor, look, I know once a month I got men's group. I'm going to be out there. I got them. We'll have breakfast. We'll do our thing. But the rest of the Saturdays, I have settled aside, because what happened? A little girl comes in. Now I've got my wife, my child, but I have those days set aside where I don't pick up the phone, where I put it all to the side and say, hey, because that's obedience too. And as you're moving and we're progressing and we're moving through our ministries, and maybe I'm going a little ramble here, but I do this. But it's like, as we move through our ministries, we got to remember, I posted something on this the other day, that this is my ministry too. Otherwise, we reject them. We don't give them all the glory that God wants us to give them. That's God's child that sits next to me. But yeah, I love the seasons that you're going through. I love that you've built a men's ministry and with people who are coming out of the system. I love that you're putting together not just, hey, I'm just gonna be okay, because okay usually gets people put back in. Right. I work with people up in Baltimore, that fall in this, and you can see it when they become mediocre in what they're doing. They end up going back to what they were doing. So it's awesome that you've put together this program.
Yeah, I like that you've acknowledged that tasting and experiencing success is not the solution to being more obedient, in the sense of, I think a lot of people are like, if I didn't have all these struggles, if I didn't have all this, if I was more free, Lord, I'd follow you better. And yet that's when all the there's temptations at every level, but what you're hitting on is in my life, I always identify it. Okay, I have a season. It's like a mastery. It's like, okay, maybe I'm not going to call myself a master like God, but I mean, like, he's trained me. I'm good in whatever circumstance I'm in. And I don't get to just sit there, because he loves us and he wants to grow us. So what happens? I get I'm up to something else, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's hard to obey again. Oh, it's hard again. Now I'm falling into religiousness again. Oh, I'm just and then he works you, and then all of a sudden it's like a video game. You have to prestige. You got to prestige over and over. And that's what I see in your story. And I think that's so cool. And the verse that I had for this section that God just kind of laid on my heart is in 1 Peter 1, where it says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. Because there's the mindset from before, and every level we go up, it's almost like we have to rebattle our former worldly mindset again in this new level. And I'm curious what kind of nugget, like, you don't have to give all the nuggets, but like one nugget of like what you've learned in a past season that you're having to almost relearn now in your new circumstances.
What comes to mind is the word self-image. There's a quote that says, you'll never outperform your self-image. The way you see yourself will always manifest. I remember when I was in prison, Shay, there was a time where I was about to come home. I'm in all these leadership positions, but I've said this promise 2 times already. And this was my 3rd trip back. And I remember crying out to God, and I was like, Lord, I don't want to come back to this place despite how good I do while I'm here. But can you tell me, like, what's my issue? Like, what's my problem? And I found myself like, asking God, like, am I like addicted to drugs? Am I addicted to that lifestyle? Like, what's wrong with me? And I'll never forget what God spoke into my heart that day. It wasn't like this loud, audible voice, but it was a simple statement saying, you still have a false self-image of yourself. And that's the reason why you always get out of prison and you go back to familiar people, places, and things, because you still lack the confidence to soar with eagles.
Right.
And that changed everything right there. That simple truth that God spoke in my life, that it was my self-image that kept me under this lid where I wasn't able to soar with eagles, because I still had this chicken head mentality. And so I only soared when I was in prison. But when I transitioned, I always went back to my lowly place, because I got validation. They knew my name. So I always went back to those places. And once I overcame that, things just started changing. And I would say that just the self-image, just that one thing alone right there was probably the biggest nugget right there. Is it causes me to self-reflect and be like, hey, the reason why you're in this situation is because the way you see yourself.
So how do you lead men? So when I say this, it's like, so you came to this realization. I had to come to this realization. We call it a lowly place now, but back in the day, we called it our comfort place.
Right.
It's like, yeah, it's my good place, because, I'm pumped up. I got all this, man, they like me. We're doing it. We're going out. We're at the scene. I'm trying to keep it clean here, PG. PG. But then you hit that Psalms 139:23, search me, O God moment.
Yeah.
How do you work that into when you're working with your men that are coming out of prison, and you're in these groups where you're trying to bring them to that realization that they need to ask God to search me, because they're having an identity crisis? How do you bring, or what steps do you bring into your coaching that lead them in that direction to come to that moment to understand, oh my gosh, I've been looking at this all wrong?
Yeah, I would say that I want to say every person, every man that was in prison has this hunger for leadership. They've just never been validated. They've never seen themselves as leader. And when I started walking in leadership, I was like, why were so many men drawn to like leadership classes and things like that? Because deep down inside, they've never had anyone draw that out of them. And so that would be the first thing is just helping them understand, hey, look, you have to know yourself to grow yourself. A lot of men in there have no clue on how God has wired them. You know, they don't know their strengths, they don't know their weaknesses, and just discovering like everybody has their own different personality traits, and you're unique and you're perfectly made, you're wonderfully made, you're fearfully made. That was a big step right there, was understanding, hey, I don't have to be like Tuan. You don't have to be like me. Because you know what I used to think? Everybody can do it like me. Everybody can be like me. And that was a very disappointing thing when these people never met that. It's like this. I used to be so good at motivating people. I would motivate people outside of their potential. Now, when you can motivate people through recognizing their gifts, their talents in the body of Christ, that's when things start shifting. And that's what I started realizing. That's why leadership was so important for me, is you're helping people actually discover their purpose, and you're giving them a reason why now. See, so many men leave prison without a reason why. So they always go back.
This has you and identity like all up and down it. And I'm curious, like, what did you think? Because this is the one thing that I haven't asked anyone on this season yet, but I'm curious is, what did you think of words like submit and obey before? Like, and this can go in a lot of directions, but what did you think of those words before? And then now, today, as you sit, you know, your company is having brilliant success, you know, your relationships, like now when you hear those words, where does your mind go?
Right. I think before, when you hear the word submit and obey, it sounds kind of religious, right? I think religion brings darkness. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. And through grace and through truth and mercy, that's where light comes from. Like, there's freedom there, there's liberty there. And so now when you ask me what does submit and obey mean to me now, it's coming to the light. And there is freedom, it's grace, there's truth, and obedience is just way more fulfilling now versus before. Right. You know, where it's like these rules, you know, Shay mentioned 1,000 different rules and regulations that would, you know, but yeah, that's what it means to me.
So did it ever grind you back in the day?
Did they ever grind me? No.
So you like, obedience, what? Serve you, huh?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I think that even me is, I'm sorry, brother. Prison and military, the only difference is that we just got away quickly enough that we didn't get ourselves in trouble. Okay, there's a lot of guys in there. But I'm saying it all boils down to the same thing. And when you're talking about men, I like that. You know, it's like religion, darkness. When we start thinking of serving, when we start thinking of selflessness, and we start thinking, it actually brings light. It's amazing how God works us in that. But what I really want to go back to, and you said this, you said men in prison want to lead. You've noticed this. You know what's really cool about that is that from the beginning of time, or from the beginning of creation, from the beginning, at the very beginning, what did God do in Genesis 2:18? He said, oh, you're alone. I need to bring you a helper. See, that helper, so he's now put him in charge of something. We have been designed to be in charge. Now, through all of the fall and all this stuff, it has got so twisted. Right. That whole leading and guiding, and there's followers in this, but at different levels of this, and I understand it. But it has been instilled in us, and it goes right back to family. It goes right back to family. Every man that's in a family is a leader. And so these are core. This is like leadership is at our core. God designed it that way. And it's beautiful that you're taking people who are broken. I'll keep going back to this because I think it's amazing how you're taking people who are broken, who are chasing something in life to make them feel better. Because we're so entitled. Man, I was writing something today and I'm about to preach it. But anyways, Christ is sitting on the cross, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but Christ is sitting on the cross, and he says, I'm thirsty. I'm thirsty. In humanity, we're thirsty. In humanity, in the world, we're thirsty. And then Christ is sitting on the cross thirsty, but what does he do? He finishes up by saying, it is finished. He took enough vinegar to wet his tongue to say, it is finished. And from that point forward, man no longer had to thirst. And that's what we see in this. And this is what I see in your ministry. And I love it. That's probably why I'm so worked up. It's like, I love to see the people who are broken being fostered into a true position that will bring them sustenance, that'll bring them the food that they need, the bread of life, the living water. And so, brother, hands off. I'm clapping over here. I love what you're doing. I love it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd want to share, like just to
like
people as a wrap up, as a go out, as a punch him in the face and say, no, just kidding, just kidding, people. He ain't gonna punch you in the face. Well, maybe, I don't know, but
no, as I was just listening to you, Shay, about it's important for us to help men discover their work. And you notice even when God first created Adam, he was working. And there's so much honor in us being providers in finding that work, because if a man doesn't find his work, it doesn't matter what relationship he joins, there's going to be a lack of fulfillment there. And that's why you see a lot of, just messed up relationships, because the man has not found their work. Therefore, he can't find the right helper that can actually support him in that ministry. And so now that I'm entering into the season, I see that work is very important for me, because it gives me that ultimate fulfillment of being a man and a leader in my household and providing and also being that royal priesthood too. So that was just a thought that I had there of just reminding me of like how important it is for us to discover our work. And that's where that obedience comes from, where that helper actually comes in to actually push you even more.
And look at that shirt you're wearing. What does it say?
Kingdom entrepreneur.
Kingdom. There you go. Kingdom work.
Yes.
Kingdom work. We find that, we dial it in.
Yeah,
yes.
It's not the kingdom toil. We've been freed of that. Kingdom work. So thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. I think people are going to get a ton out of this. So before we go, how can people reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Facebook. I have TikTok too. You can look up Kingdom_Coach. That's on Instagram and TikTok. I have a Facebook group called 6-Figure Scaling Method for coaches. And what we do is we work with mainly faith-based coaches, Christian coaches that want to learn how to just grow their business online. We realized a big part of our calling is bringing our gifts and our talents into the marketplace. And we never saw this probably about a year ago, but this is where we operate, is in the marketplace now, just helping other coaches also have more impact, and then just helping them learn how to just overcome like money making mindsets, and then just helping them prosper and learning new strategies. So that's where you guys can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, those links will, as always, be in the show notes, as well as all of the verses and things that we talked about today. So until next time.
Bye.
Bye.